My name is Timothy Shosh and I am the moderator of this panel this morning. Almost exactly 3 years ago, Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development was adopted by, simply said, the whole world. Agenda is, as we hear more and more, and rightly so, is not of the United Nations, but it's of all of us. And not just all of us governments, but all of us people, societies. Agenda 2030 is of businesses, civil society organizations, scientists as well, researchers, and everybody, all the way to each and every individual, to come together to implement this blueprint for the global development. Agenda 2030, simply said, has three main goals: to connect back people with the economy. Secondly, to decouple environment from the economy. And third, to leave no one, but really no one behind. This might be very superficial, and today we are here to unpack this, to see where we are today, what different stakeholders across the world, but also across different sectors are doing, and how can we even step up the gear in implementing sustainable development goals in order to achieve them by the set date. This is 2030. We will kick off this discussion by a view of the world where we are today, and the world and the weak signals or strong signals, different signals that are already today telling us where we might be or most likely are going. Dr. Janez Potočnik will give us this introduction into thinking about this. Dr. Janez Potočnik has many titles, but to name just two, he is the chair of the UN Research Panel, but also member of the multi-stakeholder platform of the European Union on Sustainable Development Goals. Global development environment is not a new topic for him. He has held several roles to be able to look at this from various perspectives, and he is the best person that can share and give us the state of the world in this sense this morning. Dr. Potočnik, the floor is yours.
So, the story about the current economic model in light of the Sustainable Development Goal and our commitments which were done by that. I will start with a quote from Professor Guy McPherson. He's the professor in the Arizona University. Quite nice to start the presentation of what we will talk about. If you think that the economy is more important than the environment, try holding your breath while counting your money. So let us look first to the world in which we are living and what are the major things which we would need to take into account. We got all pretty much used that to the UN figures that we will be approximately 9.7 billion till the end of the century. If I would translate that to human language, in 1 year you will have on the planet additional Germany population. In 4 years you will have additional population of United States of America. And in 9 days and 6 hours you would have on the planet additional population of the country which is hosting you. All that is happening more or less in least developed part of the world, which means that the people rightly aspire to live higher quality of life than they are currently living, which means that the pressure on the resource use will be enormous. 8 people own the same as the poorest half of the world. The richest 1% is more wealthy than the rest of the world. 800 million people are hungry, over 2 billion suffer from micronutrient deficiencies, over 2 billion people are obese. We throw away 1/3 of the food we produce, 1/3 of the energy, 1/3 of the land, 1/3 of fertilizers, everything which we are using for the production of that food. More than half of the cities which will exist in 2050 are not yet existing. China has in the years 2011-2013 used more cement than the United States during the whole 20th century when they were building the cities of the United States. There is an increasing evidence of the climate change threat. 60% of ecosystems are already degraded or used unsustainably. Biodiversity is disappearing quicker due to the presence of humans. 85% of the world's fisheries are at or beyond biological limits. 1/3 of soils is degraded or used unsustainably due to various reasons. 7 million die premature due to air pollution. In Europe, 500,000, which is approximately 20 times more than in car accidents. And 1 million of plastic bottles are bought every minute globally. Only 9% is recycled, and almost 80% still finish in the environment. Nearly half of the work we do will be able to be automated by the mid of the century. In 1997, if you remember, the computer Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov in the second attempt in chess. That computer was programmed by humans. Last year, Kiji, the world Go champion, and Go it's more complicated game than the chess, was beaten by a computer which was not programmed. Just the data were given to the computer. It learned the game and it beat the best champion from human. So we are entering the serious era of artificial intelligence. So for the first time in human history, we face the emergence of a single, tightly coupled human, social, ecological system of planetary scope. We are more interconnected, interdependent than ever, and our individual and collective responsibility has enormously increased. If I put it into the perspective of the world in which we are living, what has actually changed is that before we have lived in so-called empty world. This empty world was dominated by nature, by ecosystems. We are now living in a full world which is dominated by humans. So before labor and infrastructure were the limiting factors of human well-being, now natural resources and environmental sinks are limiting factors of human well-being. That's the basic change which we are all together facing. In the 21st century, we unfortunately do not have any more the luxury of thinking and acting based on short-term logic and short-term interests. But that's unfortunate reality in which we are still currently pretty much living. This is also quite interesting explanation. Here it's called DPSIR framework. It's a kind of analytical approach which is used in science, in particular in the area where environment is analyzed. So D stands for drivers, P for pressures, S for state, I for impact, and R for responses. So the real problem is that more or less we are concentrating on impacts and state. Even the climate change is impact and state, or the biodiversity disappearing, or air polluting, all that is impact and state. Whenever you say drivers and pressures, you say human activity and humans. Economics, more or less. So why this is so important? Because the responses are different, the policies are different. If I give you just one example, which is not connected to environment, but it's connected to European policy when it comes to migration. Building higher walls around Europe, putting more police at the entrance will not solve the problem. Nor putting more army on the streets. It's a fake feeling of safety. In essence, if we would really want to address that problem seriously, if I paraphrase the American president, then our policy would need to be Africa first. That's going from impact and state to the drivers and pressures. And in environmental area, this is pretty much common way of approach. So if we said that we have to go to the reasons, then we can't avoid talking about economy. This is a very nice presentation which is showing you on the horizontal axis Human Development Index. So more right you are, more developed you are. Here it's on the vertical axis, it's environmental footprint. So higher you are, higher it's your, bigger it's your footprint. The dots are the countries, and the dots surrounding red are actually European Union member states. So in Europe we are all living well, but all far beyond the limits which the planet would allow. The green corner on the bottom right-hand side is including all the countries where people are living well within the planetary boundaries, so 0. What is the real problem? The real problem is that in the development we all go first up, and then when we see the progress, then we start to go down. And the real responsibility, in fact, in this development path, which we are all sharing, is lying with the developing countries. Because we are those who need to show that we are able and ready to go down. And to a large extent, we also master innovation technology, and we need to show and help the rest of the world, which is now in the development phase, in particular the big countries which are currently very quickly developing, that they would not repeat some of the mistakes which we have done in the past, and that they would be in the position to leapfrog. So this is a bit simplified picture how I see the economy of today and why we have the real problem. You know that the equilibria are reached when the prices meet the quantities, and quantities are basically decided on the basis of price signals which we are receiving. What are the price signals in which we are living? Financial capital is over-rewarded and overvalued. Human capital is under-rewarded and undervalued, and natural capital is unfortunately not rewarded and not valued at all. So when it comes to market, where we as producers and consumers apparently act rationally, even that is quite questionable, then of course we shouldn't be surprised that we are living in our societies and economies where we are in total imbalance in social, economic and environmental way, which actually I have shown you before with the state of the world and economies in which we are living. So this is really interesting. By the way, whenever you have this science on the top, IRP and UN, it means that this is based on our scientific work which we have done. Surprisingly, the shortage of resources will not change the behavior of humankind and the economies, but it will be the environmental and health consequences caused by this excessive use of those resources. Just one example. China has closed approximately 2,000 companies 3-4 years ago around Beijing. They didn't close it because those companies were running out of resources, but because the use of the resources in those companies caused the pollution in Beijing, which forced the public authorities to close the companies. Or they would basically face the consequences of the human unrest. This is normally how the system should look, so living well within the ecological limits. Economic system should be the function of the ecosystem. And the major problem in that slide, which is actually based on the European Environment Agency, is of course the environmental externalities. What are the environmental externalities? Environmental externalities are the costs which are existing, but we are denying that they exist. We prefer that they are either paid by the health system, by the people who are here, or what is even more common, that they are paid by the future generations, because the future generations simply cannot complain. So, in essence, we live in a system where profits are privatized and the costs are to a large extent socialized. Here you will see the different kind of possibility to measure human progress. The one which we normally use is gross domestic product. Gross domestic product is only economic measure. If you add social and natural considerations like human development index, genuine progress indicator, inclusive wealth index, and this is a progress per capita, so it's global growth in 20 years, 1990 to 2010, we see that we have grown only if we look through GDP. If we look through other measures, we have basically not grown, or to say it differently, a lot of the growth in the past can unfortunately not be considered as growth, because at the same time it was causing quite a lot of costs, which we didn't account it as a cost. So there are many new things and many new developments. Very recently, this Kyoto Manifesto for Global Economics was published. I would just like to draw your attention on that because it's quite interesting. It's new nature and purpose of economics. Individuals are facing social fragmentation. Public institutions are facing social isolation and disconnection from society. We should rethink the nature of human being and explore the power of community. Meaning is constructed in our subjective relations with others, in socially producing together in our local world. That's basically the essence of the book. And where to go, basically they recommend returning to local while acknowledge the global connectedness as well. So in short, when we talk about our economics, it's not helping if you are walking faster, if you are walking in the wrong direction, and that's to a large extent today the reality. You have heard from Tim at the beginning that we have commitment which we have done through the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the conclusions of our research work is also that the trade-offs between various goals are existing. You can't avoid them. But if you want to minimize those trade-offs about achieving those goals, the most important is to follow the sustainable consumption and production path, which means that if you want to eradicate poverty, achieve zero hunger, if you want to have good health, if you want to address climate change, it's not possible without seriously changing our behavior and economic models. Resources are, in a way, the missing link. I will explain you just in one example why I consider them a missing link. It's an example of the climate change which you all know. This is current policy on climate change. All the policies are through carbon management, through energy, renewable energy. So that's part which we are talking about. But imagine for a second that you are living in a society where we have abundant energy, cheap energy, all the renewable energy, but at the same time, population growing like I showed you that it's growing, and the same consumption and production pattern as we currently have. Do you think that we have solved the climate problem? Not at all. You have just shifted the problem from the energy sector to the rest to the mobility, to housing and other sectors. That's the only thing which you have done. Of course, energy sector is important to address. I'm not saying that. It's very, very important. But if you don't add to that land management, water management, materials management, so decoupling the economic growth from those resource use, you have a serious problem even dealing with the climate change. This was analyzed last year by Material Economics. I was in the steering committee of that group, the Swedish group, which is actually showing you for steel, plastics, and aluminium and cement. So not addressing only energy part. This is the baseline, already including energy efficiency and all energy policies. But if you go also via the demand side, then basically you can cut emissions additionally for 56%, which is the way how you can actually address the climate change. Or if you look through the shared mobility scenario for passenger cars, if you go from a current model to the shared model scenario, which is the circular economy model, then you can cut CO2 impacts for 70%. Total cost of ownership could go down for 77%, and externalities and cost to society for 74%. So it has major potential, and that's not that anybody is taking the car from your hands. Just changing the logic, because we don't need the car, we need mobility. That's what we have to understand. This is a kind of a structure of logic which we are developing in the International Resource Terminal. So human well-being can grow faster than economic activity, but what is essential is that economic activity is decoupled from the resource use, and both economic activity and resource use are decoupled from environmental impact. So if you have think, when I was taught economy, or I was a modeler in economy, if you didn't have data for GDP, you simply use the energy data. That's exactly what we need to decouple. So it needs to be done in a different way, and then, of course, you have serious chances of dealing with the problems. This is the outline of so-called circular economy system, which I will not go into detail, just to explain you that on the left-hand side you have renewable materials, on the right-hand side you have non-renewable materials. Then one major mistake which is among people's understanding what circular economy means is that people do understand that recycling is actually the circular economy. So recycling is the worst of the good. When you recycle, you have already used materials. So the most important are maintaining, prolonging the use of various kinds of which you can achieve by designing the product differently, by organizing production processes differently. But I think we don't have the time. We can discuss that later if you wish to go into detail. Circular economy, in short, it's a system in which you try to keep resources as long as possible in production and consumption system, and keep their value high. Because if you lose the value, you lose economic incentive that this would be done in logic of circularity. It started as an environmental initiative, in 2 years was transformed to an economic-based initiative with positive environmental and health consequences. In essence, it should be seen as a part of the bigger picture of societal and cultural transformation needed to sustain the humanity and its prosperity. But where we are, this is the quote from The Economist just a few days ago. The world is losing the war against climate change. We have all seen that French Minister for Environment, Nicolas Hulot, resigned, saying, I do not want to lie to myself anymore. These are negative parts of the story in which we are living. But on the other hand, major actors major economic actors have moved. That's pretty clear, because they are pretty much the only ones who in society think strategically. So for me, the central question is how to overcome the short-termism inbuilt in our democratic political systems and institutions, from public to financial, which is in fundamental conflict with the system change which we would basically need. Alone we fail, working together for a sustainable future, that's the title of today's session. People are strange. If I go to doors, we want changes, but we don't want to change. And that's in essence pretty much part of the problem which we are facing. We have seen in the World Economic Forum, so in the major economic forum which we have globally, these are the messages which came across. Complexity and scale requires new forms of collaboration and more systemic approaches. The challenge seems not to be one of not inadequate scientific evidence anymore, rather it's the one of cooperation and implementation. There is a deepening perception of a lack of synchronicity between economic and environmental policy responses to global risks. So what would be needed is that we would seriously reconsider the governance which we globally have. Reconsider basically the sovereignty. More cooperation is unavoidable. And the best example of that is actually European Union. Why? Because 70 years ago, with only one simple reason to avoid conflicts and wars in Europe, we have decided to raise the sovereignty on a higher level, to decide about quite a lot of issues together. I think that the world today is facing pretty much the same challenge. Either we will cooperate more than we do with the challenges which we are facing, or we will face conflicts and wars. There is probably no other alternative. You know that we have pre-existing conventions from 1992, climate change, biodiversity, and combating desertification. My question is there a need for a new instrument which would connect the existing conventions to resource management, to the system change of current economic model, enabling to remove the existing market and trade barriers, something which would be global resource management, natural resource management convention, or something like that. It could be done also through the existing conventions, to be fair. But since I worked 10 last years in that environment, I seriously doubt this will be done, because people simply don't want to go out of their own silos and work in cooperation. So a new economic model based on sustainable consumption and production, integrating all pillars of sustainability, is simply necessary and unavoidable. We need to fix our broken compass. One of the things which needs to fundamentally change is that the business sector, the companies, will in the future not manage only their own risks of the company and profit maximization, but also the risks of the society when they manage their own risks also. So we are all together, including the companies, responsible for where we go collectively. If we are to avoid globally extensive, intersystemic crises and frequent conflicts, then let's get serious about implementing what we have agreed in SDGs. Changes are unavoidable and humans are supposed to be intelligent. It's high time to prove it. Change will not appear by waiting for the leadership of others. Be the leaders on your own level of governance, authority in politics, in business, academia, civil society, in making your investment decisions. People are saying sometimes that this is a story of gloom and doom. I firmly believe It's just the contrary. I think it's a major opportunity for innovation, new development opportunities, new jobs, like any transition needs. And the alternative I would rather not talk about, because it is the story of Blue Window. That's the last slide, really easy. When Albert Einstein was asked why it is that mankind has stretched so far as to discover the structure of the atom, but we have not been able to devise the political means to keep the atom from destroying us, he replied, that is simple, my friend, it's because politics is more difficult than physics. So that's the problem. The story which I have shared with you is actually pretty much the story of physics. You can't go beyond something which is based on physical laws, but we are trying. And solutions are in the hands of politics. Either we will wake up and work together, or I will not further continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Potočnik. I would like to continue with this thought about politics and maybe bring in one thing that Al Gore once said. He said, political will is a renewable resource. And I think this is another way we can look into ability to solve this problem. Now, I would like to ask you to switch on the light so we can see our panelists when they come up and so they don't trip when they come on the stage. But I will invite our panelists here now, and we'll be going from this global main picture into the specific deep dives into what governments are doing, what businesses are doing. We have a diverse group of great panelists, and I will now ask them to join me up here. First, Her Excellency, Ms. Minister Huda Rumi, Minister of State for Happiness and Well-being, and Director General, Head of Prime Minister's Office from United Arab Emirates. Minister, please. We also have Mr. Vasya Bochka, CEO of young Slovenian company doing groundbreaking thing called Irio. He'll share more what they do very quickly. Then we have the Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs from Sri Lanka, Mr. Vasantha Senanayake. I maybe mispronounced your last name, and I apologize about that. Mr. Harald Neumann, CEO and Chairman of the Executive Board and CEO of the Novomatic from Austria. Mr. Neumann, please. And we also have a representative from the Young Leaders here at the Forum, Mr. Miloš Popovic from United Nations Office in Montenegro. Miloš, please. And we also, our last but not least is Mr. Anas Al-Mofer, who is the Director of Analysis and Planning from the 2030 Delivery and Rapid Intervention Center from Saudi Arabia. Thank you and welcome to all of you. We'll not be going into their biographies, as in 2018 we all have internet and we can all Google them or check the web page of the Bled Strategic Forum. But we will jump right into the discussion, going from this bigger picture into the specifics. And first, I would like to start with Her Excellency. Minister, you are not only the Minister for Wellbeing in the past 2 years, but you're also the Director General of the Prime Minister's Office. And there, you have a long years of experience with, as you said, visions, strategies, implementations, going in circles, and then this last bit that you're most known for is just the last cherry part. So I want to take this opportunity to kind of ask you, how does the UAE do, coming from a great vision, from the founding of the country, to great documents and good plans, to actual implementation, bringing not just environment or AI or something, but everything together in a system to deliver what you're trying to deliver right now?
Thank you, Tim. I think the UAE is a young country, but we have a good experience in developing and implementing strategies and vision, whether for 5 years, 10 years, or even 50 years. And over the past 12 years, I have been working closely in facilitating and coordinating the implementation of our national strategies. I joke with them, I say I have black belt in visions and strategies, but I think the most important is the delivery of these strategies and making sure that the well-being of the citizen is at the crucial of the delivery process. I can talk on and on about our experience in the UAE, but briefly I would like to share with you our experience. The vision started 50 years with the founding fathers. The main wealth of the country for us is the well-being and happiness of our people. And since then, we have developed many strategies and visions to continue the vision of the founding fathers. I would like to share with you just one example, which is Vision 2021, which marks the 50th anniversary of the United Arab Emirates. It was launched in 2010 by the Prime Minister with the aim of making the UAE among the best countries in the world. And well-being was an integral part of that vision. But while we're still implementing the 2021, we launched our centennial plan, which is the UAE 2071, because the future does not await for anyone. So based on the learnings, we have adjusted, we have included new themes, just like the circular economy, the food and water security, artificial intelligence, advanced science in our centennial plan. Now coming back to the Vision 2021. When we launched the document or the goals, that was not enough. We needed a robust implementation plan. So the UAE launched something called the National Agenda, which has 6 pillars, which is the implementation plan for the vision. This was not only enough. We developed 52 national indicators to monitor the progress towards that vision. In addition, we have cascaded this vision into all the plans and strategies of the government entities to make sure that they are involved and they are aligned to our vision. And also, it was very important for us to build internal capabilities, not just in the planning, but also in other areas that are essential for the delivery, just like excellence, improving services, innovation, and so on. And in 2016, we developed a robust monitoring system to track the delivery. 2016, we have achieved a lot. But there seem many areas that might fail due to collaboration issues. And I know this is the issue of any government around the world, because government entities, they tend to work in silos. So the UAE government launched executive teams, 36 executive teams, with 500 officials, senior officials, bringing everyone together. Private sector, government sector, and society to support the implementation of the Vision 2021. In 2017, the progress was around 71%. The clock is ticking. We don't have much time. 2021 is just 3 years from now. So we come up with something called government accelerators. Government accelerators is like an institutionalized approach where you bring cross-cutting teams to address specific issue, achieve ambitious goals in short period of time, with the hope of then scaling it up to the national level. So if I want to summarize our experience with the vision, I think for any country, you need a solid vision supported by the leadership and cascaded to all government entities. You need internal and local capabilities so you can tailor and customize the solutions for the country and adjust. And then you need a strong performance management system to track the delivery and then be agile and adjust as you go on.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much. We had a chance to hear a bit about execution model of the UAE. We'll go more into the specifics of the Agenda 2030 a bit later. But now I would like to turn to Mr. Noman on, you come from a very successful quite a big company that does business all around the world. And businesses like this are known for their excellence in organization. So I will not go that much into your execution, but more into your responsibility side of your business. As a company, you run a lot of environmental, but not just environmental, but also social responsibility programs in addressing the issues that are connected to your work. So how does the Novomatic bring into the core business all the responsibility parts? We've heard from Dr. Potočnik that responsibility is part of the solution to address global challenges.
Yeah, maybe as everybody knows that the gaming industry is a very sensitive industry, and it's, I would say it has not maybe the best image, and I think the only way to improve, first of all, the image, and first of all to improve, let's say, the sustainability of this business, a lot of jurisdictions have implemented very strong regulations. So this industry is one of the highly best regulated business in the world, even more than the finance business. I just can tell you that I have to give all my personal information, credit card accounts, bank accounts, everything to the authorities, and they will check it for money laundering and so on and so on. But they are also requesting a lot of sustainable developments in the company. For example, when we received our Nevada license, the commissioner there asked us what kind of measures you have implemented for the society, what kind of measures you have implemented for well-being of your employees and so on. So this kind of sustainable work is not nice to have for our industry. It's a must-have. It's also from our stakeholders. It's requested and it's demanded. And even our employees, especially the young generation, is asking what kind of green strategy do you have? What are you doing for us? It's not only simple money which the people are requesting. And we have implemented in our corporate responsibility strategy 5 very clear pillars. One is, of course, responsible gaming. That means we have implemented very strong, for example, biometric systems, because you can only protect the player if you know him. And then if you know the player, if you know the player behavior, you can react, and you can at least avoid any kind of gaming addictions. The next one is 100% compliant. We have implemented a corporate-wide compliance organization with ongoing, as a monthly reporting, with ongoing trainings. We want to have everything what is endangering our compliance. And for example, if you're not compliant, you're simply losing all your licenses in the US. So this is very critical for us. The next one, enjoy working with us. It's another pillar. The well-being of our employees is very important. Employees are the asset of the company, especially if the gaming industry is a high technology business. It's a software development more or less, which is deciding whether you are successful or not. And in that kind of technology companies, innovation just comes from motivation. The people are motivated, you get the right results. We have a lot of social facilities, we have a lot of programs for bringing mothers back to work. We have a special program for people who retired to provide them some kind of part-time working. We have a very clear green strategy. We have implemented several KPIs, waste management, CO2 emission, and so on, which we are carefully checking every year. And of course, also this being part of the society, we have a lot of sponsorships here supporting Paralympic teams. We are supporting this Austrian huge project, Lichtenstubel, which is supporting projects for people in need. So we have a very strong corporate responsibility strategy, and at the end of the day, it's also good for the business. So this is nothing something which we are doing for ourselves. It's a win-win situation for both parts of the world. It's more or less, it provides a kind of sustainable gaming business on the one side, but on the other side, we are supporting the society and we are supporting the environment by doing all these activities.
Thank you. So we can say in short that you are trying to approach this connection with the world you operate from the environment perspective as well as from the social and internal, and we'll be talking about connecting this with the wider environment a bit later. But now I want to turn to the State Minister from Sri Lanka and ask, how is Sri Lanka as a country taking steps to address holistic development in terms of the Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals?
We are doing this in several ways. We've identified certain key issues. Firstly, with regards to renewable energy, Sri Lanka derives much of its energy source from hydro power. Then, of course, we are also concentrating now on solar energy, wind energy, and since we're an island, on energy from the sea, derived from the sea, the ocean. So we are looking at increasing, and we have increased renewable energy sources and decreased other sources, and that is the general direction that our country is heading in. Apart from this, we have declared lots of areas which we believe to be environmentally sensitive and areas that are rich in fauna and flora as gazetted sanctuaries and national parks in the country. We are having an issue with the man-elephant conflict in Sri Lanka, in particular, because Sri Lanka, despite its tiny size, is the country per square kilometer. When you compare the amount of elephants, that has the greatest amount of elephants in the world, when you compare the size of the country and the amount of elephants that you have in Sri Lanka. So, because of this great number of elephants that exist in this tiny island, we are now having a problem with human development and elephants, partly because of the loss of natural habitat. This has happened due to the issues that were highlighted earlier: housing, agriculture, dairy industry, because a lot of the cattle grazing is done in the national parks itself. And that causes a severe food shortage for elephants. So we have started redefining and protecting our national parks more vigorously. And of course, we have also started recycling of plastics, which is a recent phenomenon and is happening in certain localities in local governments, but not throughout the country. Our objective is to finally have full recycling of plastics and not having it released as very common to the environment. So these are some of the things that we are doing. Then again, Sri Lanka has also found the use of certain fertilizers and pesticides having a direct link on kidney dysfunction in certain parts of the country. And in this context, we have banned certain chemical substances, and we are encouraging the population to use, as far as possible, organic fertilizer or semi-organic fertilizer, and to gradually move away from certain chemical substances. There was a move by this government to try to do it immediately, but what we find is when soils are used to substances for a long time, it does take a while for you to make the soil rich again and remove the chemical dependency, and that is what we're trying to do. So these are some of the areas in which we work.
Thank you. we are walking from different perspectives this panel, and now we move to Mr. Bochko, who is from a company that uses blockchain to do something. What is that you do, and how did you come from the rush on cryptocurrencies and all of the hype around making a lot of money to using this technology to do something for humanity?
Thank you for the invitation, Tim. Every panel like this lately seems to have a blockchain guy there, for better or for worse, and usually you're loved. People love blockchain because they make money off of it, or they hate it because they didn't make money or they even lost money. So it's a bit of an ungrateful position. But I just want to step back a bit initially and explain what we're doing. And so we started a healthcare IT company, and there's, I guess, about 2 reasons why I'm sitting here today. And the first reason is that why we got into healthcare is because we believe that healthcare is on the path of unsustainability. You know, it's eating the GDP. In the US, it's at 20%. In EU, it's about 10% of the GDP, and it's growing. So we have really good healthcare, but soon we won't be able to afford it anymore. So what good is that? And as mostly engineers who try to solve problems, we think there's immense value in data. And as Dr. Toshnik in the introduction mentioned, there was 2 years ago where there was a software that beat a Go player, and it did that through artificial intelligence, and basically it got feed data, it learned how to play the game, and then it beat the human. And so what we think is that one thing is for sure that software is eating the world. All the technologies are adopting software in one way or another, and that big data and artificial intelligence and so on, and machine learning can improve the outcome of healthcare while reducing cost. That's the main idea. So we think through those things that we can put healthcare on the path of sustainability. And so that's really, one of the goals that we wanted to do, because IT, I'm not saying that there's not value in imposing binary years in photos, but sometimes it's good to work on something more meaningful. And so as we started doing that, obviously there was a lot of new, we think, bleeding edge technologies that can enable certain things. And so one of the things that we want to do is to move towards healthcare data ownership. So we think that one of the main problems is that we're getting increasing amounts of data, healthcare data being generated, but that data gets sent into a black hole somewhere, never to be seen again. So it's difficult to access it. It's usually guarded by institutions, and when you do access it, it's hard to get clean data, it's hard to interpret it because it's in different formats, and so on and so on. And so we think that and again, I'm not saying blockchain is the silver bullet here, because it's definitely not, but it does enable new things, as do other technologies. So blockchain is the most hyped technology that we're using, but there's other things as well. And so we think that with new technologies we can move to a place where the end users, the patients, own the data. And we know that there's companies out there that want that data. Obviously, Facebook's the prime example of that. And we also know that people are more than willing to share data, especially if it goes for academic research, if it goes for causes that are very dear to them. So it's not a problem of people not wanting to share the data, especially if it's done in a transparent and anonymous way, but it's more about how to actually get it. Because right now, even if I give consent to share my data on my electronic health record, someone would still need to go to my GP and try to get that data out of them, and that takes a long time, and it's expensive and so on. So that's sort of what we're trying to do. But the other thing, I guess, why it's interesting that, or why I'm here today talking to you, is that we did a pilot project in the Middle East, where we partnered with an NGO, and we provided some basic electronic health records for the refugees there. So the NGO that we work with provides primary health care for the displaced people in the Middle East. And one of the problems they had was that it's good to have healthcare record continuity, because it improves the outcomes of treating those people, but at the same time there's a high churn rate of doctors, so there will be volunteers coming in every 2 months, and so there needs to be some data continuity. And so one of the first things that we did with them was to build a sort of purposefully designed system to hold healthcare records that they are generating when the refugees come in for a checkup or visit, or there's something wrong with them. But we're also building a system where it can, in time and with new technologies, move towards the path of a sort of a medical passport. So what we can enable those people to do is to actually own all of that data that's been generated, have them on their phones. And I visited a couple of refugee camps, and people still don't believe me when I say it, but there's usually at least one smartphone per family, which is quite interesting. And so we can put all that data into a smartphone, and so wherever they go, they can bring that data with them. It can serve as a sort of a medical passport, and so, you know, hopefully when they move to a permanent location somewhere, it won't be a blank slate in terms of their medical history. They will have something to bring with, while at the same time it's also helping their healthcare where they are right now.
Just a short question, this sounds much more sophisticated than what we have in Europe.
Well, yeah, that was one of the reasons why we actually did this pilot project, because, I mean, yes, we are a for-profit company, but it was much easier so obviously there was an immediate problem and pain that we could solve there, but it was sort of a good training ground, because obviously when you don't have the basic healthcare, you don't have a lot of the systems, then there's a much less inertia working against you to implement or try new technology. And so for us, that was a really good opportunity to show that there is value in end user data ownership, that there is value in the continuity of data. We could hopefully improve the lives of people over there while sort of showcasing our use case. And so, you know, I would encourage a lot of companies that are innovating and trying new things, that they maybe sometimes move away from the most developed countries, where obviously you need to go there to make money because there's the purchasing power, but you can go in some other places where you can demonstrate a lot of the things that you're building in a much quicker way. And it's, you know, it's quite satisfying sometimes also on a personal level to be involved in something like that.
So you're building your product, developing your product by investing in the societies, and then later you can give this to those who don't have it, and then also sell it to those who want to improve their systems, maybe in for-profit side.
That's the idea.
Okay, thank you. A rapid intervention center sounds quite interesting. So Mr. Almover, Saudi Arabia is aiming to take quite some steps into different aspects and different areas of development. But what does that mean? Tell us practically, how does that look like, the rapid interventions?
Thank you, Tim. Saudi Arabia actually has coupled the Sustainable Development Goals with its 2030 vision. So we have started looking to our future, what needs to be done for the future generations, and we try to align the whole government entities and civil society. So we have 3 pillars in the vision: ambitious society, ambitious nation, vibrant economy, and thriving economy and vibrant society. So those 3 pillars, we try to develop 6 overarching strategic objectives all the way to 2030, where we made sure that we are coupling all the SDGs with that 2030 plan. As many countries have been there, and implementation in government and transformation is not easy. Most of transformation projects fails, so we tried to work out the governance that would help the kingdom to achieve its goals. We have a very big country, more than 13 regions, very big size and different demographics and geography. So the governance that we laid out in the execution of the vision where we have 4 components that are key to deliver the vision. 1 is setting the strategies and communicating them. 2 is going in the ground and making sure that delivery and execution are happening. 3, managing the performance and making sure that we are progressing as we hope to. And 4, communicating to the people and communities and civil societies as well. So 4 key components to drive the execution of the Saudi vision. One of the key exercise that the government has done is engaging people, engaging citizens and civil society into that transformation. So, be it in education or in NGOs or in the private sector, everyone is already aware, committed, knows what is expected from them. So we're trying to do this not in silos as we used to do, but it's a collective effort, making sure that everyone is signing up for the vision. And we've seen quite interesting engagement from civil society, from the NGOs. They're contributing to the initiatives that the government entities are trying to achieve. So on the vision, because of the size, we try to also decouple it into programs, executive programs. So we had 12 executive programs to execute the vision, starting from the government transformation, where we focus on the government excellence and also the enabling the economy, and also engaging and improving the services for the civil society, to other 11 programs focused on different subjects in the financial industry, in the quality of life, and also serving the pilgrims for the kingdom. So those programs are delivery units, are machines driving that execution, working closely with all the government entities, with the private sector, as well as the third sector in that regard, and they have clear plans, clear communication strategies to engage the related stakeholders. And one of the key programs that we're working on is the strategic partnerships, where we have identified 3 key segments globally that we do need to partner with in our journey, and we have shared visions with few countries, and we have partnership councils with others. So it's really not within Saudi only. We're looking at the globe and making sure that our effort is aligned on the bigger context. So that's pretty much the structure of the vision and what we're trying to do. The initial deadline for the programs is 2020, so we will be looking at what have we achieved and planning the next 10 years until 2030.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it seems that it's a lot of not just a rapid interventions, but also opening up in different areas as a society, and we can tackle this a bit later. We have with us also Mr. Popovic. He attended the Young Bled Forum where Agenda 2030 was discussed. So, and the sustainable development was from various perspectives. We focused also more specifically on a few issues. So, my first question would be, what was the main idea or main recommendation of your discussions at the Young Bled Forum this past weekend?
Thanks, Tim. First of all, let me still have on my head a UN hat and share, like amazement of all the initiatives all around the globe, both from private sector and the governments, regarding the 2030 agenda. Of course, the 17th goal is partnerships. We have to partner, and as Her Excellency said, this is usually one of the key issues when it comes to policy implementations. This was also one of the key messages from the Young Bled Strategic Forum. There are two things we would like to share. The first one is that we're grateful. We're grateful to the older generation for several things. For the results achieved so far, for halving the poverty in the world, for HIV not being the issue in the world anymore, for basically kind of exterminating some of the diseases like malaria, like Ebola, like HIV, as I said, are controlled now. The second thing we're grateful to the older generation is that older generation admitted, people in power, decision makers admitted that the relationship between the people nowadays and the planet does not work. and therefore we need to do more. We need to leave no one behind in order to tackle the relationship between people and people, in order to tackle the relationship between people and the planet, to preserve the resources we currently have, but also to praise more women, to praise more people with disabilities, disadvantaged people, and marginalized groups. The second key message from Youth-led Strategic Forum is that youth is a stakeholder, and youth is here to stay. Youth is here to stay not only because of the 2030 agenda. We are here to live in this world. We are here to live in the world of the sustainable development, and this is why we should be treated very seriously. We were treated seriously in development of the agenda. I believe you're all aware of the post-2015 consultation that happened all around the world. So more than 10 million people were consulted when the Agenda 2030 is developed. But now it comes to implementation. Governments usually tend to bureaucratize things, and it's the UN that also tends to go to bureaucracy, tends to keep itself to the indicators, like 240 indicators were developed. And this is a good tool for measurement. But the thing youth needs is implementation. We need to see results in the real world, and we need to see poverty decreased, we need to see hunger ending, we need to see lakes, rivers, and oceans preserved. So those would be the two main messages from the Youth-led Strategic Forum.
Okay, thank you so much. And now I will follow up with a question. Miloš is also, he's not part of the UN where the policies are written and documents are prepared, but the implementation side. You're placed in the country office of Montenegro, where you implement sustainable development goals, and as a UN office you deal with a lot of internal stakeholders and silo, but also external stakeholders. What would you say is the biggest challenge for cooperation between all of those actors, and also with the development, international development assistance? You have countries partnering, you have governments, you have international organizations. What would you say is the biggest challenge that you're facing in bringing all of them together to act and to deliver?
That's a tough one. It's $1 million question. So the thing is that the 2030 agenda is a thing you said in your introduction. It's not the agenda of the UN. It's not the agenda only of member states. It's the agenda of each one of us personally. And that's what UN offices all over the world, 130 of them are trying to do, to engage as much stakeholders as possible to implement the agenda. So each one of us can have its own goal, such as a colleague does. He has SDG 3, he has SDG on wealth and on health and well-being. And he's going to pursue it through his personal business. He's going to pursue also achievement of the SDGs. Many things are done in the world currently, and we are not aware of it. The thing is that we have to become aware of the agenda, of the complexity of the agenda, broadness of the agenda, and try to implement it. What we do in Montenegro and what countries in the Western Balkans are doing more and more is tightening this process to the EU accession, since this is the main reformative agenda in the Western Balkans. And this is kind of the recommendation and a good lesson that we have. Tight SDGs to the main development agenda, the main reformative agenda in your country, such as the vision that you have in the United Arab Emirates. 2071, it is too far, to reach all those goals, but still you can integrate 2030 agenda, and this is what I believe you do in your country. In the Western Balkans, we tied it to the EU accession process. And this is where we try to cooperate also with the EU delegations in countries, in the field, work with governments, work with civil society, work with private sector, to just push everyone to do more, bit by bit, and we'll achieve each goal.
Thank you very much. I want to turn back to Minister Rumi. Dr. Potočnik said in the beginning that we are very much focused a lot on the future. Not on the future, on the present. And some scientists call it a presentism bias. We can see with the fast pace of the world, everybody just wants here and now. In partnering in UAE society and also in the region, how do you manage to be specific and implement while also focusing so far as 2071? Are people saying, I'll be dead by then? What is it for me? What's in for me? Even my children might be dead by then, I don't know. So how do you do that?
Thank you, Tim. I think in the UAE we adopt a balanced approach. I mean, we are here in the now and we have certain issues that we need to tackle. But also it's our duty to secure a better future for our children. So 2071 is the plan for the next generation, empowering youth to be part of the implementation and the formulation of the plan of 2071, because they are the generation who will take it to the future. We have specific issues that we need to tackle now, but we have also to plant the seeds for future things. Like there are emerging trends around the world, whether it's artificial intelligence, food and water security is coming up, advanced sciences, as I said, circular economy, well-being, mental health. We need to be prepared right now for the future. And I see it a continuation of the vision of our founding fathers. What helps us here is being agile and keep innovating and reinventing ourselves. Innovation is our way for the future. And for us, we aim to make the innovation part of the DNA of the nation. Not just the government, not just the private sector, it's a way of life. A couple of things that we have adopted to instill innovation culture in the UAE. For example, we created an innovation center dedicated to government within the Prime Minister's office. We have a national committee for innovation focusing on 7 sectors. We have appointed chief innovation officer in each government entity. And also we have something called the Innovation Month, where we celebrate the culture of innovation, trying to promote it. And when I talk about innovation, I think the UAE is doing well when it comes to the input of innovation, but we would like to be better when it comes to the output of the innovation.
So you would call, sorry to interrupt you, but you would call this one of your main challenges, how to give the output?
How can we encourage IP? How can we encourage scientists? How can we encourage more research? Because research will help us solve current issues and also help us with the future issues. And one of the things that really picking up regionally is the government accelerators. Because government accelerators is about changing the mindset in the government. Government, they usually work slowly, they need budget, but when you bring cross-cutting teams together and show them what is possible in short time, then you can scale it up. And I would like to mention a couple of things that we've done in the government accelerators. Car accidents are high in the UAE. It is an issue. It is a pressing issue. And if you leave it to Ministry of Interior, they will not be able to do it. And it might take time, and they might ask for budget. And resources are limited, not environmental resources, but also financial resources. And we have to be efficient in using our resources. So we brought Ministry of Interior, Transport Authority, everyone together. And we worked for 100 days only. Chose the most 5 dangerous roads in the UAE. And the most dangerous months. And in 100 days, we saved 104 lives. I mean, the life of the people are really precious. And if we can do this in 100 days, then we can scale it up to the national level and get rid of that issue. Government services is key for us, because the services are the daily interaction between people and the government. Part of the government accelerators was to save 101 workday for people, rather than going to this entity and this entity by integrating the processes together. Was that easy? No. But pushing the teams with a new mindset and showing them what's possible is what we aim. We aim that this accelerator is not just an approach, but this is a thing that we adopt in the whole of government.
Thank you. Vasantha, I want to challenge you a bit. Yes, you are for profit company, but could you see a team like yours not work as a company, but a government setting environment like your company internally to develop products like you have developed? Or do you think this is impossible?
Tough question. No, I mean, I don't think it's. I think it's possible in all settings. It has to do with, I think, incentives with KPIs, and I think a big part of or a big component in that is having a sort of a sandbox to play in. And you know, I don't mean that as in playing around, trying to do different useless things, but to get to a framework where you can try new technologies, you can try new products in real-world use cases while having it contained, because some of the things you're doing, you don't exactly know yet what the consequences might be sometimes. So you need to have an environment where that can be contained, and you need to also pay attention to what kind of a framework you have, what the rules are, what the regulations are, how effective those are in mitigating the negative sides of what you're doing, and so on. So I think, yeah, just having a framework in any sort of setting, whether that's a government agency, an NGO, a for-profit company, to try to do real-world use cases and be careful and be and know full well that you are doing something that has not been tried and tested before, that the outcome is a bit uncertain, and then also being willing to change your mind and to fail. And I think that's maybe the other very important reason why in government doing innovation is hard, because everyone's very risk averse, because you get points for being right all the time, and no one's right all the time, but nobody wants to change their mind and admit that they're not right. But you know, the most clever people change their mind often, and I think that's something that needs to come to the public sector more.
Thank you. I would like to take this discussion also held to Mr. Neumann. How far do you follow, you mentioned responsible gaming, and while you make the profitable gaming, you also focus on responsible gaming. How far do you follow the effects or the mitigation of positive negative effects of these kind of projects on the end users, or do you cooperate with any partners to run these programs? You mentioned so far only technically this is done by knowing the user and biometrics, but what about the social part and the effects part?
So, as I already mentioned, there's a lot of regulatory pressure on our industry, and partially we have to provide regulatory bodies with KPIs. So there is in Austria, for example, when they have given us gaming licenses, they were testing monthly reporting regarding, let's say, unusual gaming behavior of our guests, and if there are some people with unusual gaming behavior, then we have to talk to them. We have to check their private situation, and at the end of the day, if they cannot give us answers which are in line with our regulations, we have simply to ban them from any kind of gaming. So I think there's we are also cooperating with a lot of medical institutions, but for me it's also a question of the development of the country. There are several countries which are not taking care at all about player protection and all kinds of this. That's more difficult, because it's also a question of the competition. If you are the only one who have implemented very strong player protection measures, then at the end of the day you will not have any guests, because the guests don't like that kind of questions. Do you have enough money? How often are you coming? And so on. So for me, it's a question of the government. I think if the government is implementing and introducing strong player protection issues, it's much easier for us to operate with them.
But would you do something? You mentioned regulations, regulatory limits, but do you think you could also, companies, not just yours, could take up action on several areas even if there is no regulation, just out of responsibility to the society?
I think we are doing this now as much as possible, just to avoid any kind of future issues, because player protection comes more and more. I think it will be now discussed in the United States, how to avoid addictive playing and so on, because they have a very strong regulation regarding money laundering and all this stuff, but player protection, they still have this opinion that every person is responsible for himself and not really that the state should care. In Europe it's a little bit different. We have very strong player protections. No, we are introducing player protection systems in advance just to be, let's say, ready if this regulatory pressure is coming.
Thank you. As you mentioned, a very ambitious plan and a lot of things that you're doing, but we've also heard that social change happens slower and culture change happens slower. So how do you deal with, despite all those rapid intervention, you can't just force the change of culture and society overnight. How do you deal with this in implementing all of those goals?
There's a saying that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think we're definitely focused on making sure that the change is coming from within, from the society to the society. So we're not imposing agenda on people. It's something that people are working towards and everyone is supporting. So the engagement that we've done with all the segments of the society, I think, is paying off. We have seen great adaptation, great commitment from all the sectors that we're tackling. Not just that, with the social media and the influence of social media on society, we can see that some people are self-promoting the agendas that the kingdom have already laid out. So there are so many things that we haven't really anticipated, and it's really great. The vibes on the society and how people are adapting the change is amazing. There were things that were delayed due to potential cultural barriers. Women were not driving in Saudi. And my wife just got her license a few weeks back and she's driving. And people are embracing change and loving it. And no one really is against that. So this is the thing that we are trying to do. We're questioning, we're curious. If there are things that are used to, if there are things that we weren't really tackling in terms of cultural issue, it's time now to surface them and make sure that people are aware of the change that is about to come. So this is I think the key agenda: citizen engagement, so civil society entities engagement, being part of all the agenda of the 2030, and we have really had the teams on the government entities to make sure that we know what are the expectations and what are also the priorities for people to prioritize it in the agenda of 2030.
Thank you. And before we turn to our keynote listener, Dr. Potocznik again, I'd like to come back to the State Minister. So, Mr. Senanayake, I have a question for you. If you had one thing that you could ask international community to help you solve one issue in terms of achieving sustainable development goals and working together with them. So, really quickly, just one thing. What would that one thing be?
Well, I would actually concentrate on the man-elephant conflict that I spoke of a little before. In Sri Lanka, we have managed to contain the problem. We haven't solved it. Solving it would require a lot of resources. And now that Sri Lanka is categorized as a middle-income nation, we don't get as much aid and assistance from the rest of the world because we have now reached that categorization of middle income. But the reality is some of these larger, more ambitious projects cannot be managed with the funds we have as a country. So we actually do need international assistance to solve some of these pressing problems. What I see as the main problem for the man-elephant conflict in Sri Lanka is overgrazing by the cattle and dairy industry of our country. Because what happens is the cattle herders tend to send all their cattle to the national parks of the country, and they graze on the grasslands in the forest, and they come out in the evenings back to their cattle owners. So the owners don't actually face any difficulty feeding their cattle because they get that free from the forest. But what that does is that depletes the forest of grass and everything the elephants eat. And this creates a situation where the elephants come into agricultural land, and of course then they get shot at by farmers and all sorts of other issues. So this is a huge recurring problem which we have contained by using electric fences around most of our national parks. But all our national parks are not covered by electric fences, and even where there are electric fences, the elephants are very smart and they devise ways to break them. So the best way we could contain the problem is to change the dairy industry entirely by going for better breeds of cattle, maybe from Israel or from Australia or New Zealand or one of these countries that have better quality cattle. You import them. They don't need to graze on grass. They don't graze on grass because they're so huge. They're like elephants themselves. They can't walk very far, the cattle. So they live on a cattle feed. So if we are able to import that quality cattle, train all our people in the dairy industries to use high-yielding varieties of cattle that produce a high amount of milk, that don't go to the forests and graze on grass but have to be given a feed, then I think the problem of overgrazing in the forest end, which will again result in enough food for the elephants in the national parks, which would mean they don't come out to human settlements. That would, I think, be the area that I would ask if there is international help to help us. And if I may actually touch on another topic, but we are sorting that out, is overfishing in our waters, which the main culprit has been our neighbor India. But we get on very well with India, and we've been discussing this with India, and the problem is sorting itself out. But India has such a large population of fishermen that the government can't totally control that. And some of them come into our waters and overfish. I mean, the Indian side has been overfished. Now the Sri Lankan side, we find a lot of Indian fishermen there, and this is the only cause of irritation between India and Sri Lanka. We love each other very much apart from that. But if that problem can be contained, because Sri Lanka is very marine rich, we have whales, we have dolphins all year round. And if the marine ecosystem in our part of the waters is also depleted, India's side has been depleted now. If our side is also depleted, we would lose varieties of marine life that exist only in that part of the world.
Thank you. Thank you. We have had a walk from very specific problems and very natural related problems like man-elephant conflicts to long-term planning and 2071 long-term thinking, innovation and machines to responsible corporations and smaller businesses who are working for profit but also testing their products and giving a lot out to free, so it's a win-win situations. But now I would like to ask again our keynote listener, and then again Dr. Potocznik, to wrap up this discussion. Maybe somebody can bring a microphone first to Dr. Purg. Dr. Purg has been around the world, met a lot of people, heard a lot of stories, and today we embrace the complexity of agenda with bringing so much diverse content to the stage. So I know it's a hard task, but Dr. Purg, what would be your conclusions? How can we work together? Because we all agree, I think, today that alone we can only fail.
Thank you very much. Of course, I was, since I'm a president of Bled School of Management, I am very interested in education. And I heard a lot of examples of good practices in this field. And I think that if we convince the business to behave sustainably, then they need, in fact, the support of educational institutions how to do that. Many times they are not, I mean, they could get more information and more sharing of best practices. And one of our contribution is, and that I learned from today from Mr. Potočnik, is the wording, you know, like decoupling. And I hope that I brought for each of you a booklet sharing vocabulary on sustainable development, because I hope that this word is in too. But this impressed me very much. What impressed me very much was also, not impressed, but I mean, I was becoming more aware than I am, how in fact it looks simple, but it's not simple at all, how to change our behavior concerning consumption. We are living in the developed and in less developed world on the increasing consumption, and we have to change dramatically. And I believe that this will be very difficult. I also, of course, see in artificial intelligence, many of you were mentioning that, and I think that looking to the fact that what Mr. Bočko said, that the young generation, you know, a company like his, is using the big data for something which is very important in society like health. I think that this is extremely important, and I would only encourage this. Of course, I also became more aware of something which is what also Mr. Potočnik said, maintaining is better than recycling. I was always believing very much in recycling, but I think that this is something what was opening my eyes today. I was, of course, very impressed by somebody whom I know very well, a company in Austria. I even organize sometimes some events in Mr. Neumann in your company. And you really have a feeling for good people, like Klaus Niedl and all these people who are helping you to disalienate, I would say, the people who work in this business and who need badly. And I'm very happy that you are dealing with this. I mean, this was also because Timotei said that I should tell what was really what I shall remember. I also shall remember that the word impact and implementation, what I heard from the young business, Bled Strategic Forum, because, and I also liked what you said, the relationship between people and planet doesn't work, and more, of course, with people. And there is existing in the world an MBA study which is like MBA for one planet MBA, starting with Henry Mintzberg and Jonathan Gosling, etc. I think that we should definitely pay more attention to integration of all this, to education, to, I also like this government services. I think that we are pretty weak there, and I like your example from United Arab Emirates. And I like innovation is a way for the future. Of course, and you said innovation comes from motivation. I think that innovation is, of course, extremely important, but we also have to be a little bit, how shall I say, careful, because not every crazy innovation can be, I'm sure that you agree with me, can be helpful. But thank you very much for this very rich discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Put, for this recap. And now the last minute, because we're already running late, is to Dr. Potočnik, who started with kicking off and now got all of this and through all the complexities of the technology, please.
Thanks, Tim. I think one of the things which impressed me is that practically everybody was relating their debate to the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals are kind of a global contract which we were able to achieve, thank God. I was, by the way, somehow in charge for the European delegation leading it in Rio. And I do remember how difficult it was to come to that, and I was very pleasantly surprised when I've seen what at the end came out of that process. So I think it's our responsibility that we raise it on the higher profile. So if you would go out there from this room and ask what the Agenda 2030 is or what the Sustainable Development Goals are, you would be unpleasantly surprised. So in Slovenia we have just had finished the election campaign and debate. How many times Sustainable Development Goals were mentioned? How many times we discussed those issues which are in essence the only real important issues for your future, for our future. So it's really important that we profile it higher. Second, long-term, short-term, also mentioned by some of you. I lived in national administration and I also lived at European Union government. And frankly, in none of them anybody is seriously thinking strategically. And this needs to change. I think we need to start working on that, and SDGs are practically the very good way out of that. Some of you mentioned that the vision is very important, but not enough. Few of you, I think I firmly agree with you, because it's much easier to agree something on the paper than to do it then in the practice. And the thing which I would, you said that you are grateful to the older generation. By the way, it's nothing worse than ungrateful children, but don't be too grateful, because we are not living you really the world which we would be proud of. I think there is many of the challenges which we have to work collectively. Finally, on digital transformation you were talking about, I think it's many of the ideas of the transformation of the society, circular economy, were already known 50 years ago. But we were simply not able to deliver it. So digital transformation is one of the major enablers, and part of my activity currently is exactly that, to connect the digital transformation with the circular economy, with the understanding that digital transformation you would make it more powerful if you connect it to real problems. And this is certainly something which could go together. For example, when you create business models like mobility and so on, sharing and so on, without digital transformation, it's impossible. Blockchains are the major tool which we should use to empower the citizens, that we can trace the products, that there would be transparency introduced, which is essential if we want to change the overall consumption systems. So, to conclude with one sentence, I was impressed by listening to all of you, how much it's going everywhere. But finally, if there is a question, is that enough? The answer is no. Is it going quick enough? The answer is no. And a lot of responsibility actually lies in public services, in politics. And I hope we will be able to deal with that seriously in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Great wrap up, and with this we conclude the session. Thank you.
Thank you.